Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into some truly monumental source material. We're going to track the sheer, unprecedented scale of India's historical approach to poverty alleviation. Because as we all know, poverty, it's multidimensional. It's not just a lack of material wealth, it's a fundamental denial of opportunity. So to break what economists call the vicious circle of poverty, the Indian government essentially deployed this massive, constantly evolving matrix of interventions over the last few decades. Let's just jump right in and explore exactly how 17 distinct state schemes shifted from handing out basic survival rations to building really modern, robust financial safety nets.
To make sense of all this, our agenda breaks this massive structural evolution down into 4 historical eras. We have wage and food security, followed by infrastructure and housing, then social security and skills, and finally, health and crisis response.
Era 1, Wage and Food Security, spanning from 1993 to 2009.
Okay, so these early days, they were really the raw survival years. The government's main focus was mobilizing manual labor literally just to stave off starvation. Starting in 1993 with the Employment Assurance Scheme, the goal was to provide 100 days of work to 2 members of a rural family during acute shortages. Then jump to 2001, and this evolved into the Sampoorna Gramin Rozgar Yojana, which cleverly tied wage employment directly to food security. And you know what's really fascinating here? The 2001 Food for Work program. In drought-affected districts, the government used this unique kind and cash payment model. Laborers were paid partly in cash, sure, but also partly in free central food grains to ensure their families just wouldn't starve. Ultimately, all of these early stepping stones paved the way for a massive flagship law in 2005.
Now you might be wondering how they actually paid for all this. There was a recurring cost-sharing ratio for schemes like the Employment Assurance Scheme and SGRY. We're talking 75% funded by the central government and 25% by the states. The 75 to 25 split was the financial backbone of the era. It basically allowed the central government to heavily subsidize rural development while still making sure the states had some skin in the game when it came to execution. So let's see how all of this builds into something entirely unprecedented. In 2005, those earlier policies were absorbed into a single mega-burst, MGNREGA, or the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. I want you to really notice the phrase legally guaranteed. This wasn't just another policy rollout, it fundamentally transformed poverty alleviation. Livelihood security went from being a nice government promise to a strict legal right for rural households.
And the absolute crux of it all comes down to this number, 100. The Act legally guaranteed a minimum of 100 days of unskilled wage employment every single year to any rural household that asked for it, paid out at the minimum wage rate.
The scale and structural impact here are honestly staggering. First off, by law, 1/3 of the beneficiaries had to be women, which led to a massive wave of female empowerment and pushed up agricultural wages overall. Eventually, the whole thing was rolled out across 648 districts. Now, historically, poverty programs in India suffered from intense corruption and massive leakages. To combat that, MGNREGA was later integrated with the Aadhaar-linked payment system. This meant they were wiring cash as direct benefit transfers straight into the workers' bank accounts. No middlemen. The result? Between 2006 and 2019 alone, an astonishing 47 crore households were provided employment.
And this wasn't just a big deal domestically. The United Nations Development Program actually released a report in 2015 that brought it global acclaim. They officially recognized that a safety net of this sheer size truly had no precedent, nationally or internationally.
Era 2, Infrastructure and Housing, spanning 1997 to 2015.
So, once basic survival mechanisms were somewhat established, the government's focus began to shift. They pivoted toward building tangible, lasting assets for the poor. It's actually a dual pivot if you look closely. On one hand, there's a heavy focus on rural village development starting in 2000. But on the other, there's this sudden realization that urban poverty needed urgent attention too. For instance, the 1997 SJSRY scheme shifted focus straight to city streets, specifically targeting the urban underemployed by pushing skill development and self-employment ventures.
Meanwhile, back in the rural sphere, the Pradhan Mantri Gramodaya Yojana, introduced around the 2000-2001 budget, was just laser-focused. It targeted 5 absolutely critical village-level pillars to drastically improve the rural quality of life. We're talking health, primary education, drinking water for drought-prone areas, housing development, and perhaps, most iconically, the Gram Sadak Yojana. That last one finally connected small rural villages of over 500 people with actual all-weather roads.
It's pretty amazing to contrast how the nation's approach to housing modernized over time. Take the historical Indira Awas Yojana. It started by providing entirely free rural houses, mainly to vulnerable scheduled caste and scheduled tribe families, as well as freed bonded laborers. They eventually built over 325 lakh, that's 32.5 million houses by 2013. But then, look at its modern replacement, the 2015 Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. Instead of just rural freebies, it shifted toward real financial integration. It offered credit-linked interest subsidies between 3 and 6.5%, with a massive goal of building 2 core homes for the urban poor.
Era 3. Social Security and Skills, from 2001 to 2017. As India's economy liberalized and grew, these interventions became much more sophisticated. We're talking an absolute explosion of modern empowerment tools over this very active period. We see everything from early 2001 efforts aimed at providing Social Security to elderly agricultural laborers, all the way to a massive 2015 push introducing formal pensions, accident insurance, and huge educational and vocational training schemes.
If you break down the data, the sheer scale and extreme affordability of these modern financial safety nets are kind of mind-blowing. The Shiksha Sahayogi Yojana, for example, helped keep kids in school by offering a 100 rupee monthly scholarship to high schoolers below the poverty line. Then you have the PM Suraksha Bima Yojana. It brought uninsured folks between 18 and 70 right into the formal safety net, offering 2 lakh rupees, so 200,000 rupees, in accident protection. And get this, the premium was just 12 rupees a year. Alongside that, the Atal Pension Yojana stepped in to finally offer unorganized sector workers a guaranteed regular pension.
Beyond just handing out financial safety nets, the government really started tackling structural unemployment head-on. The PM Kaushal Vikas Yojana saw that class 10 and 12 school dropouts were just swelling the ranks of the unemployed. So by directly connecting them to industry-relevant vocational training, they managed to train nearly 20 lakh youth in just a single year. And then there's the HRD scheme, which I think is a brilliant move. It injected 500 crore rupees to preserve India's cultural heritage, but cleverly turned that preservation work into a massive engine for both skilled and unskilled employment generation.
Finally, Era 4, Health and Crisis Response, covering 2017 to 2020.
This era basically represents the ultimate stress test for all those social safety nets the country had been weaving over the past 3 decades. Anchoring us in this final stretch, we see crucial health and digital literacy groundwork being laid in 2017. And this was just 3 short years before the completely unprecedented interventions required by the global COVID-19 pandemic.
Right before the crisis hit, the 2017 National Health Policy took a massive leap toward universalizing primary health care, officially offering a 1 lakh rupee health insurance coverage for families below the poverty line. At the same time, the Women Empowerment Campaign was busy setting up village-level centers to push digital literacy. And honestly, when the pandemic suddenly froze the global economy, this digital groundwork turned out to be absolutely vital.
And this is where we really see the true scale of the crisis response. Just look at the staggering number, 42 crore. That is 420 million individuals who received direct cash transfers from the government to survive the economic freeze, and this was right alongside one of the world's largest free food grain distribution programs.
The financial pipelines they had built, they actually held up. Cash support was seamlessly and directly injected into more than 20 crore women's Jan Dhan bank accounts. To put that into perspective, it proved that the digital and financial inclusion strategies of the previous decade actually worked when it mattered the most.
And when the crisis suddenly forced millions of stranded migrant workers to return to their home villages, the system rapidly deployed the Garib Rozgar Abhiyan across 116 districts. Over a frantic period of just 125 days, it generated 51 crore days of immediate local employment for those returning migrants.
So, as we take a step back and look across all 17 of these distinct schemes, evolving from basic manual labor for food grains all the way to instant digital cash transfers, I want to leave you with this final thought. When a nation completely transforms its approach to alleviation over 30 years, are we finally eradicating the vicious systemic circle of poverty? Or are we simply upgrading how we manage it? It's a lot to think about. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive explainer. Keep analyzing, and I'll see you next time.